Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, September 25th, 2008. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, it's a twofer. 2 interviews for the price of 1. We'll check in on the preparations for the very first Australian National Homebrewing Conference with Andy Davison, chairman of the event. And we'll talk to Brett Joyce of Rogue about their venture into growing their own hops. Well, if you're new to homebrewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And you can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing. All one word. Well, let's jump straight into the mailbag. I got a couple of notes following our conversation with Chris Colby last week about sour mashing. The first one comes from Kai Troyster, who we talked to a couple weeks ago about attenuation. Kai writes, "While I haven't done a sour mash yet and don't plan to do one in the near future, I was wondering on the effect of sour mashing on the attenuation and extraction efficiency. This is not a concern when sour mashing is used to correct the pH into the optimal range for mashing, but when large amounts of sour mash are added, in my experiments, I found that below a mash pH of 5.0, room temperature measurement, the attenuation and extraction efficiency start to suffer significantly because of the inhibition of enzymatic reactions." Kai says, based on these findings, I would suggest to add the sour mash towards the end of the main mash if its addition would drop the pH below 5.0. Some can be added earlier to get the pH to 5.3 to 5.5. This would allow the main mash to achieve better conversion and attenuation before the pH is dropped further. And Kai says, if brewers have been doing it by adding the sour mash at the beginning, I would be interested what the mash pH and attenuation were and if the mash was able to achieve full conversion. In other words, a negative iodine test. Well, thanks, Kai. I think that makes sense. If you're making a large percentage sour mash to make a sour beer and, not a smaller one to correct the mash pH, it might benefit you to wait to add it until later in the main mash process. I mean, after all, the first step in making a sour mash is to do a saccharification rest on that mash, which will become sour. So that would convert your sugars there, so you wouldn't have to worry about doing that to the sour mash in the main mash. And if adding the sour mash at the beginning of the main mash would severely affect your mash pH and therefore your extraction and your attenuation, then you would probably be better off to wait to add the bulk of that sour mash until the end of the main mashing process. Of course, I have no data to back up these assumptions, but Kai's been doing some experimentation on attenuation and how mash pH affects attenuation, so that just seems to make sense. So you might want to take that into account if you're wanting to make a sour beer with a large sour mash. Will from Oxford in the UK writes, the souring organism that I was recommended was Lactobacillus delbrueckii, whose ideal temperature is 50 degrees Celsius or 120 degrees Fahrenheit. As Chris mentioned, 120 degrees Fahrenheit will destroy some of the spoilage bacteria, so stabilizing the mash temperature is quite important. Making a larger mash volume is therefore useful for maintaining temperature. You should also avoid crushed malt because the crushing will heat the grains and may kill the organisms. I was recommended to use unkilned malt. The best source is maltings, whose steeping tanks are teeming with bacilli. Will says using regular uncrushed, low-kilned grain should still work, however. One final thought, if your pH is very low and the contact time is high, you may get metal taints from copper manifolds. It's best to use only plastic in the mash tun. So there again, there's something to think about when you're thinking about sour mashing and pH. Definitely want to avoid those metal taints. Avoid the dough balls and the metal taints. But seriously, if you are doing a sour mash, you have to take pH into consideration, not only with the mash efficiency, but also the effect it may have on your metallic mash tun parts. You might wind up with really clean copper and really metallic tasting beer. So I appreciate that, Will. Jason from Ramsey, Minnesota writes with a question on a different matter. Jason says, I'm wondering if I'm pitching my yeast wrong. During a recent podcast, you were discussing Alton Brown's show on making beer and mentioned that you cringed when Alton said not to add oxygen once you add the yeast. This got me thinking that I should aerate after I pitch the yeast. I've always aerated the wort first, then pitched the yeast. This might be a stupid question, but should I be pitching the yeast first, then aerating the wort? Does shaking a carboy with the yeast already in it damage the yeast? Or is it a feast for them, like when the kids go into the everything edible room in the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? That movie kind of gives me the willies, the original one, but that's another subject. Jason says, does it matter either way? Is it personal preference? Seems like most of what I have read says pitch yeast on fully aerated wort. Well, this may be a matter of personal preference, but what I usually do is I pitch my yeast first, then aerate, because I prefer not pitching the yeast on top of the foam on top of the wort that develops after you aerate. However, having said that, Steve and I recently made a Pinot Noir kit, a wine kit, and went according to the instructions and pitched dry yeast right on top of the purple foam in the carboy, and it worked like a charm. You know, the foam settled down, and as the foam settled down, the yeast hydrated and got to work, and we came out with a delicious tasting wine. So what do I know? I don't know. Again, I have no data. This is just all my gut feeling on this stuff. But I don't think the yeast is damaged by shaking the carboy or fermenter or otherwise aerating after pitching, though. But what do you think? You've heard what I think. If you have a different opinion on anything or want to add something from your experience, please don't hesitate to drop us a line. You can reach me at james@basicbrewing.com, or you can use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And I've been having some issues with my spam filter lately, so I apologize for any excessive tardiness in getting back to you. It seems I'm always at least a little bit behind, but when I have to sort through every single piece of junk mail that I get to find the good messages, that slows me down even more. Enough whining. Let's start off the show down south. Australian homebrewers were inspired by accounts of the National Homebrewers Conference here in the United States, so they decided to start their own. We talked to Andy Davison, who's chairman of the event, to find out more. Well, Andy Davison, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
As we were talking, it's already tomorrow there.
It is. It's already Tuesday morning over here. The sun's out, and my kids are up and running around.
I would ask you what's going to happen tomorrow, but I don't want to mess with the time-space continuum. I've seen too many movies to mess with meddling and that kind of thing. We're going to talk about something exciting here, and that is the first Australian National Homebrewing Conference. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the one, running out here in October this year.
Well, what are the dates, and where's it going to be? Give me the specifics for those down there who might want to attend.
Sure. So we're out at the William Angliss Conference Centre in Melbourne, which is basically in the CBD. And that's running on the 23rd to the 25th of October. So we've got the Australian Amateur Brewing Championships being judged on the Thursday. After that, we move into a sort of microbrewery tour. And then on Friday and Saturday, we've got the conference itself.
So where did you get your inspiration for this first national conference?
A lot of that came from one of the guys on our committee, John Preston, who actually went over and visited the ANHC last year. And he spent a bit of time, got excited about the concept, and at the same time I was sort of thinking about how we could get some guys over to talk to people just in the club level. And John and I and a few of the other guys got together and decided a conference would be a great idea.
So what's the response been so far?
So far, we've got about 180 people coming along, which is great because we've got a room that'll take about 250. So we're getting close to the numbers that we really wanted. And, we're really happy with that.
Now that's compared to the American counterpart. You're still small, but you got to start somewhere, right?
Well, that's right. And I've had a few people talk about the per capita figures and saying, if you look at the population of America, the numbers we've got are actually on par.
That's true. But I wonder, do you have any? Well, we don't have any figures for how many homebrewers we have here in this country, or any reliable figures that I've heard. You might have more homebrewers per capita down there as well, just in general.
Yeah, it's a good question. The industry over here is kind of going through a bit of a resurgence at the moment with the whole craft brewing movement. I guess we're seeing a lot more interesting beers hitting the market from our microbreweries. So there's a bit more interest in beer in general. So, where in the past people have sort of gone down to the supermarket and bought the cans and all that sort of stuff. We're seeing more and more people experimenting with partial mash and going out to all grain these days, which is really exciting. So,
how many beers are you expecting in the competition?
Around about two. They usually have between 250, 270 entries. So it's a reasonably full day of judging, and we're squeezing that into one morning. So I think we've got 45 judging sessions all happening simultaneously.
And what are the styles that are the more popular down in that part of the world?
It really varies, We see a lot of people brewing APAs these days, but a lot of experimentation with some of the older styles as well, particularly from England and from the German or Belgian regions. So, it's a real variety down here.
Is there as much fascination with the hops down there as there is up here?
Not as much. I guess there's a bit of a running joke about the amount of hops that you put in something to make it an American. But no, it really, the malty beers have a reasonable following down here, as well as the sort of hoppier beers.
And let's walk through some of the programs that you've got going on, some of the speakers. First off, your headliners, you've imported a couple of guys. Couldn't you find enough homebrewing expertise domestically? You had to import a couple of guys into the country?
No, well, we could, but we decided we'd really like to sort of expose the local guys to some of the knowledge that's out there internationally. And John Palmer and Jamil Zainashev have been great about coming over and spending some time with us for the conference. So we're really excited about having those guys down. And we've also got Chris White coming out from White Labs. So he's coming to talk to us about yeast as well. Yeah, the range of presenters has been fantastic internationally. And then locally, we've also got people like Phil Sexton, who started up a couple of our larger microbreweries down here. And also a guy called Mick Jontoff, who's the product development manager for one of our larger breweries. I guess if you guys think of Budweiser over there, we've got Foster's and CUB. So Mick Jontoff's a part of Foster's down here.
So in this country, if an expert from Anheuser-Busch came to speak at the conference, I'm not sure he would get a warm welcome. How about Foster's down there?
It's an interesting question. It's a bit of a mixed reaction in terms of nobody knowing quite what to expect. But Mick's a fantastic guy. He's one of these guys that just loves playing around with his brewing. And out at Foster's, he runs a little pilot brewery and has great fun just playing around there and loves experimenting with his styles and his ingredients. So we really appreciate him being on board.
Does Foster's get treated as badly by homebrewers and craft beer enthusiasts as the Anheuser-Busch products and the so-called Big Brother products up here do?
I think that's a good question.
We're pretty brutal up here.
Look, I don't think it's as bad. I think people acknowledge there's Foster's there and Carlton are all there out in the local pubs, and if you go out there, that's what you sort of get on tap a lot of the time. And we're seeing more and more of the micros come out. And the interesting thing about Foster's is their attitude towards helping the industry as a whole along, because they see the micros as not so much a competitor, but another part of the industry. And their involvement with the conference is along the lines of anything that grows interest in the beer industry helps them. So it's been a really helpful, healthy relationship between us.
Well, that's good. It's probably a smart move on their part, public relations wise, to be known as the good guy right off.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting because they've actually brewed up 2,000-litre batches for us of some special conference beers. So we've given them a couple of recipes, one for an Oktoberfest and the other for a barley wine. And Mick's been great about brewing those up into special batches for us, and we'll be kegging those and bottling them over the next couple of weeks and having them ready for the conference.
Well, there you go. And brewing a barley wine wouldn't be an inexpensive proposition, so that shows a bit of dedication then.
Yeah, exactly. And way out of the range of their normal activities, which is great.
So what are the topics that you see in the conference that are going to be most interesting or most exciting covered?
Another good question. So we've got, I think, the Australian homebrewing scene is really big on its gadgets. So I think everyone's going to be excited to hear John talk about the equipment and water issues. Hear Jamil talking about his secrets to brewing award-winning beers. I think we've got his topic down as. So there are a couple of, if you like, general interest topics there. We've got some more specialist ones around, what is an Australian pale ale, for example, as well as talking about gluten-free brewing. So we're going from the sort of general right down to the specifics. It's going to be interesting to see which ones are most popular, of course. But we're running as a single stream, so everyone will be able to get to see everything.
So how would you define an Australian pale ale, and how would it be different from an American pale ale?
Oh, you had to ask me that. I'm not the expert.
And if we gave away all the secrets, there'd be no reason to go to the conference, right?
That's right.
But I would assume less dominant in-your-face hopping would probably be one indication.
Definitely less prominent hopping, and using a variety called Pride of Ringwood, you guys probably aware of. But also the yeast character as well. Basically, the only existing version of the style commercially these days is the Cooper's style. And, they've had... Their recipe's got an interesting history in terms of it changing over time in one aspect, but there's one of their beers that has remained the same since about 1890. So, the yeast that they're using is one of the things that really sets it aside.
Yeah, we tend to like our yeast character, and at least in our pale ales, to be kind of out of the way, and not being very present, letting the hops take center stage, so to speak.
Sure. No, it's an interesting one because the whole serving technique of the Australian pale ale is important, because getting that yeast into the mix and into the glass is part of the flavour.
You're also going to have a session on Saturday called Yeasts and Beasts. Is the fascination with brewing with Brettanomyces and other critters becoming prominent down there?
It's something that's growing. We're seeing in the competitions, a lot of the lambics starting to show up, and people experimenting with Brett and with lactobacillus. So it's an interesting one for a lot of people, and certainly a fascinating path to take once you've spent a bit of time brewing the pale ales and the basic lagers. So, yeah, there is some interest in this. I expect that one to be a fairly popular tool.
Are you able to get your hands on many commercial examples of, lambics and soured beers and Brett beers and such as that?
We are actually. We've, I guess, over the last couple of years in Australia, there've been a number of people who have started to import a lot of the beers from Belgium, from Europe. So we're getting more and more examples of the sour beers and so on. So yeah, it's really starting to drive interest.
So what other extracurricular activities do you have going on around the conference? It seems like I noticed a brewery tour in there or two.
Yeah, so after the judging on the Thursday, we're all hopping on a bus and heading out to a couple of microbreweries to do a tour of their facilities and go and have a few beers, of course. We'll finish off that night with a stop at a pub and have a good meal there. And then the other two really exciting activities on the Friday night, we're doing a beer and food pairing dinner. So we're looking forward to that. We've got a menu lined up, and that's on our website. It's just looking fantastic, and the beers for that are being brewed by 4 of our champion brewers from the amateur championships in the past. And then on the Saturday night, we've got the presentations for the AABC, the Australian Amateur Brewing Championship Awards. So we've got all of the champion brewers from each of the states coming out, and all of the categories will be announced on that night, so that should be a big one as well.
One of the events that I most look forward to in going to our homebrewing conference here in the States is Club Night, which is I don't know if you've seen some of the video from it, but it's a wild and wacky time, and a lot of the clubs get to kind of strut their stuff and exhibit their beers and get to kind of have a lot of fun. Is there a club presence down there, or are Australian brewers kind of more independent?
There are a lot of independent brewers down here, driven by the amount of information that you can get out there on the internet. So, in particular, the Aussie Homebrewer website has a huge community of people with a massive amount of information. But there's also, quite a strong club scene as well, and that's the basis behind the club night that we're going to be running out here, and that's certainly taken some inspiration from what you guys do over there in the States. And hopefully we'll be able to put a bit of a local flavour on that. We're not going down the themed clubs just yet. We're sort of trying to get the interest in the first place. But we seem to have that. We've got one of the clubs down here in Melbourne recently did a monster brew and put together 360 litres for the conference in 5 simultaneous brew sessions, so all in a warehouse brewing at once. And a number of other clubs from around the country are also going to be putting together beer to come for the club night.
It's kind of, when I think about it, it's kind of interesting that there would even be clubs for home brewers, because it seems like home brewers are so independent to begin with. They're going out on their own and they're kind of doing their own thing. But then for them to all gather together in one group, it's an interesting experience. You've got it's a gathering of individuals, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I started out as an independent brewer myself, and I hadn't entered any competitions or anything like that. And when I discovered one of the clubs down here in Melbourne, which is the Melbourne Brewers, the whole social aspect to it, getting together, having people taste your beer so you could learn about the faults that were in the beers. It's certainly in my case the faults that were in the beers, and how to improve your brewing. And then on top of that, the ability to participate in activities you just wouldn't normally do. So one of the things our club does is trots off to a campground one weekend each year and brews up a Stein beer, which is a great experience, and just something as an independent I would never have been able to do.
That's where you heat up stones and actually do the boil by throwing rocks into the wort, right?
Yeah, it's a very primitive experience.
Any particular costumes that are required for that kind of thing, or?
Oh, no costumes.
Oh, well, listen, I appreciate your taking time, and I wish you luck on your first experience, and I hope that it's the beginning of a very successful trend.
Thanks, James, and hopefully we'll see you out here one day.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Well, thanks again to Andy, and good luck with the conference down there. It sounds like fun. Also, good luck to John and Jamil, who are spreading an American perspective on homebrewing down south. Now on to part 2 of the twofer. I was looking for a professional brewer to talk about harvest ales and the professional's take on doing harvest ales, so we could kind of glean some information from that. It is that time of year, after all, at least in this hemisphere, this half of the world. So I contacted Rick Sellers of Pacific Brew News Radio and Draft Magazine, and among his suggestions was Rogue. And Rogue stood out to me because they are getting into the hop growing business themselves. Just like many of us homebrewers, we're tired of relying on the market for our hop supply, and we want to try our hand at a little independence. So I gave the president of Rogue, Brett Joyce, a call to find out more. Well, Brett Joyce, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I want to say thank you, first of all, for distributing your beers in Northwest Arkansas, because I think that that Rogue was one of the first real craft brewers to sort of make way into Northwest Arkansas, at least one of the first ones that I can remember. So, I've always held sort of a fond place in my heart for Rogue beers. So, first of all, I wanted to say thanks for doing that.
We appreciate you saying that, and it's our pleasure to be in Northwest Arkansas. Our philosophy, for a long time has been that we wanted to be not the biggest brewery, but we wanted to be available everywhere. So we've been in all 50 states for 10 years. So we're certainly not the biggest brewery in the world, but because we're in 50 states, chances are wherever you live, you're going to be able to find some Rogue in your market, certainly.
And we've got a lot of international listeners as well. For those who are not familiar with your brewery or your beers, give us a little bit of a background on your beers and your philosophy.
Well, Rogue was founded 20 years ago. We were founded in 1988 down in Ashland, Oregon, and it was really founded by two gentlemen, Jack Joyce and Bob Waddell, that were college fraternity brothers that had worked together at Nike, and they had left Nike and subsequently just wanted to own a bar, and so they bought a bar, and there were some tanks in the back, and somebody told them that you make beer in those tanks, and that's how it started 20 years ago. But the philosophy has always been to make beer not for the convenience of the company or for the brewery, but for the convenience of the consumer. And we've always felt that the consumer wanted variety, the consumer wanted a world-class product that didn't skimp on ingredients, and that's how we've handled it for 20 years. And we don't tell our brewer ever what to put in the beer. He makes the beer. He tells us this is what it costs. We figure it's our job to figure out how to sell and market that product. So that's really been our driving principle for 20 years. We've had the same brewer, John Meyer, for 20 years, and I think he's really generally regarded as one of the top 5 brewers in the country, if not the world.
And you guys aren't afraid to get adventurous with your beers?
No, I think our approach to styles is we don't like to make conventional styles. We like to take styles and twist them. We have a beer that's made with soba grain called Morimoto Soba Ale. We make a pale ale, but it's a pale ale made with juniper. We have a stout that has chocolate in it called Chocolate Stout. So things like that we like to just take and twist and be creative with. We also have a beer called Chipotle Ale that's made with chipotle peppers. So that's always been something we've had fun with. This is just how we've always done. Our brewer is highly creative, and he likes doing that. He doesn't like just making a standard amber ale or a standard pale ale. That's not what he does.
I wanted to talk to you about harvest ales, and I want to thank Rick Sellers of Pacific Brew News Radio and Draft Magazine for kind of putting us together, because I asked him, we're wanting to do a show on harvest ales, who he would suggest to do a harvest ale show, and he suggested you guys because you are getting into growing your own hops yourself.
I appreciate Rick's recommending us getting together. Yeah, we have what you call a harvest ale. It's called, for us this year, it's called Independence Ale. And we name it Independence Ale because our hop farm is based in a small town in sort of the center of Oregon called Independence, Oregon. So the name is really is derived from the name of the city. And Independence, Oregon, in the 1920s and 30s was known as the hop capital of the world. It used to be a huge hop growing region in the 20s and 30s. So Independence, Oregon used to be known for their hops, and over the years, due to various agricultural and economic conditions, that has changed. But it's really a treat for us to have a farm in Independence, and for a brewery like Rogue that has an independent streak, we couldn't have picked a better name for the town that our farm resides in.
Now, why did you make the business decision to go into growing hops yourself?
We really felt that it was necessary to try to control our own destiny, and with the hop crisis that we started to face last year and continue to face today, there's a shortage of hops in the marketplace. It's driving prices up significantly. We saw that, and because our brewmaster likes to use a lot of hops in his beer, we did not want to get into a situation where we had to tell him to use less hops. So the alliance with our hop farmer was to guarantee the supply. It really had nothing to do with price, because the price of these hops probably be the most expensive hops we ever buy. But what we were trying to do was protect the supply of hops, because it would break our hearts and our brewmaster's heart to ever have to scale back a recipe or not make a beer because we didn't have the hops, and we would have elected not to make a beer rather than to ever tell John he couldn't put as many hops as he wanted to into a beer.
So what varieties did you pick out, and what kind of capacity are you going to get?
We did initially, our initial planting that we planted this year was 20 acres. Okay, so we planted 20 acres on the farm, 4 varieties at 5 acres apiece. Those varieties are Pearls, Sterlings, Cascades, and Horizons. And really, we let John, our brewmaster, select which hops he wanted to grow out there, and hops that we knew would do well in that growing condition. So we allowed John to select the hops, and the 20 acres, it'll give us probably about a quarter of our hop need in 2010, because as you know, the hops won't harvest until about this time next year, so we won't really be able to use them until late 2009, early 2010. We have also agreed to plant another 20 acres out there as well. So we eventually, when we plant the next 20 acres, we'll have a total on our hop farm of 40 acres.
How many years do you expect will it take for you to get up to your full production potential?
You mean 100% of our hop need be serviced by the farm?
Well, or just 100% of the potential of the farm itself. I mean, the first year, or maybe I've heard maybe the first couple years of planting new hops, you're not going to get as good of a production as you're going to get later on down the line.
Sure. Yeah, and clearly weather is always a factor, but we're pretty optimistic, and we think we'll get a really good harvest in the fall of 2009. Then we expect to have a full harvest certainly in 2010.
Wow. Of course, it helps that you're up there in hop growing country, though.
Yeah, the climate's pretty good in the Willamette Valley for hop growing.
So what special, did you have to do any special preparations to the land to make it to accommodate good growing conditions for the hops?
No, you know what, we have an alliance with the partner, the farmer partner, that handles all that. But the land is prime hop growing land. He's grown hops there for 50 years, so it's not land that's unfamiliar with hops. He did have to tear out the grass seed that was planted there, so we had to tear that up and do a little bit of preparation to the soil, but nothing too major that he hadn't done many times before.
So do you expect to get 100% of your hops from your own hop farm eventually?
I think eventually that'll be the case. That certainly was not the goal to begin with, but as we learn more about it and go through a couple of harvests, I think it's where it may end up. Although that was not the original intent. The original intent was just to make sure that if push came to shove, we had enough additional hops, hops above and beyond what we get from our other hop growers to service our hop needs. So the intent was never 100% of our hops to be grown at our farm, but if it's as successful as it's indicating that it'll be, I think it may end up there someday.
Well, what's the breakdown? At least on your first harvest, how much do you intend to use right away on your harvest ale, say, and how much do you intend to dry and save for later beers throughout the year?
What we use for the Independence Ale will be probably about 10% of it, of the total yield. The rest we'll have pelletized and used in the rest of our batches. So the fresh hop is really only about 10% of what we'll grow on the hop farm.
And what types of the hops are you using for the harvest ale?
We're going to use the Cascades primarily. We actually did a fresh hop beer this year called Independence Ale, as I mentioned previously, and we used two hops. We used Willamette and Cascades, and these were not from our 20 acres, obviously, because ours were just planted recently, but they were from the farm because our farmer grows other hops besides ours. So we were able to use hops from the farm in our Independence Fresh Hop Ale this year.
And what went into choosing those hops specifically for that beer? Were you just going for a nice, hoppy, fresh American pale ale?
Yeah, I think you accurately described it. Our brewmaster loves the nose on those hops. So he loves that fresh hop aroma, and he selected those varieties to complement the pale ale base that he used.
And when you're designing a harvest ale, what are the characteristics that you are looking for that are different from just a standard pale ale with dried hops?
Well, I think that the biggest difference is the aroma. I think that our brewmaster John is proud of when you stick your nose into a Independence Ale, you're going to smell the freshness of the hops. I think that's really the primary characteristic that he's striving for and does a great job of achieving when he's building his fresh hop beer.
And I would imagine that you've got to do some scheduling if you're going to do a true fresh hop harvest ale. You've got to schedule your production around the time of a harvest. I mean, do they go straight from the field into the brew pot essentially?
They do. Yeah, literally. What John does, he drives up in one of our vans and he takes the hops directly off the farm, so as fresh as you can get them. Takes them right off the farm into the van, and as the brewery, which is located on the coast of Oregon, is about 2 hours from the hop farm. So as he loads the hops into the van, he calls the brewery and has one of our other brewers start the brew, so that by the time he gets to the brewery with the hops, he's able to dump the hops straight into the brew system and make the fresh hop beer. So I don't think you can get much fresher than that.
Now, what other challenges come about from that? I mean, if you're using a lot of, fresh hops straight from the field, it seems like, volume would be one of the challenge. But, does it pose any kind of difficulties in doing it this way?
Yeah, from a logistical standpoint, I'd say the difficulties are two. Is that the timing is tricky because because we want it to be so fresh, it has to be very precise timing-wise. And the second part, the not so sexy part, is once you put the hops in, then you got to get the hops out. So we have to get people down into the brew kettle to haul and shovel the hops out of the brew kettle. So on a logistical level, the brewers love making the fresh hop beer, but then they got to get the wet hops out of the brew kettle. So that, from a heavy lifting standpoint, is a big hassle, but it's certainly worth it.
What do you do with the fresh hops once they get out of the brew pot? I mean, where do they go from there?
We recycle all of our spent grain and spent hops. So we have a pig farmer that's been picking up our spent materials for 18 years, who takes it all and feeds it to the pigs.
Now, I would imagine that you're going to have, unlike us home brewers or home hop growers, you're going to have a laboratory on board to test the alpha acids and all that, or do you? I mean, when you're in a situation where the hops are so fresh, do you have those evaluated like in a lab before you pick them and before you take them to the brew pot?
No, we don't do that. I mean, we really think that what we do is an art, and our brewmaster certainly has enough experience. He knows these hop varieties well enough to know what they're going to do 90%, and the last 10% that you get, just based on batches and seasons being different, we're willing to accept that variety. We think that every batch is probably going to be a little different because it's handcrafted and because these hops are so fresh. So he gets it. The base is pretty close, but every batch is going to be just a little bit different.
So you're willing to accept that from a kind of company standpoint. I mean, most big corporations, not saying you're a big corporations, but most corporations are wanting something standardized, in the McDonald's philosophy. But it seems like
I think especially on the fresh hop beer, you have to make it as fresh as we want to make it. You have to be willing to accept some level of variance, and we are.
In the future, are we going to see new beers that come about from you're having your own hops?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's really going to be up to our brewmaster John. Whatever he wants to do with these hops. If he has some ideas on new products, we love that, and can't wait to see what he comes up with. Something else I would want to talk about regarding the hop farm is we have a webcam located on the hop farm. So in case you got tired of watching paint dry, you can go to rogue.com and watch hops grow. Literally. So we have a camera that takes video stream every 15 seconds of the hop farm. So we think that's fun. If any of your listeners are ever out our way in Oregon, we give complimentary tours of the hop farm. So if they want to come and see the farm, and especially this time of year when the harvest is occurring, they can see the whole baling, drying, kilning, picking process, which I think a lot of people have not seen. So we welcome anybody to come out to the farm and take a tour with us.
Well, Brett, I certainly appreciate your time, and again, I appreciate your beers.
No, it's great talking to you, James, and thank you for all that you do.
Well, thanks again to Brett Joyce. We'll be on the lookout for their Harvest Ale down here. I hope that we'll have a chance to try it. Well, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can check out our low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD on basicbrewing.com, where you can see Steve Wilkes do a single-step decoction mash and follow me through a lager fermentation in the middle of summer, where I don't use a dedicated chest freezer. And there are also our original DVDs in Basic Brewing Introduction to Extract Homebrewing. We walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. We've got a nice little non-linear path to take you through, so you can choose infusion mashing or step mashing or fly sparging or batch sparging. And we got combo deals on our side if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country and around the world who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. And I will pack it up myself. We've got our shirts. We've got 6 colors of shirts to choose from now. Also, thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. I continue to be amazed and encouraged by the support there. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Pee-wee's Playhouse No. 1, Seasons 1 and 2. That's all I can do. I like his first show, first Pee-wee's Playhouse, the HBO special, parts of which you can find on YouTube. if you look. Also, Boston Acoustics Soundware, Great Sound Anywhere speakers, Bamboo. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dotson down there in Austin. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.